Mary, did you know your baby boy would one day walk on water? Mary, did you know your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Did you know your baby boy has come to make you new? And this child that you deliver will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know your baby boy would give sight to the blind man? Mary, did you know your baby boy would calm the storm with his hands? Did you know that your baby boy has walked where angels trod? And when you kiss your little baby, you kiss the face of God. Ooh, did you know that the blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dead will live again, the lame will leap, the dumb will speak, the praises of the Lamb. Mary, did you know your baby boy is Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know your baby boy would one day rule the nations? Did you know your baby boy is heaven's perfect lamb? And that sleeping child you're holding is the great I am. Did you know? Mary, did you know?
Wow. Beautiful, Leanne. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a joy to see all of you here this day. And I don't know if you guys noticed it, but we're kind of in the Christmas season. And it's a time of celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ, and it's also a time of celebration of an awakening of that Christ awareness, that Christ consciousness in the world. And we celebrate that as the spiritual lights of that Christ consciousness. You know, as you've often heard me say, Christ is not Jesus' last name. Christ is that awareness of the presence of the divine within Jesus, but Jesus also said that it is within you. And he came to teach that. He came to show us that divine quality that is within every one of us. And Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, saw those divine lights of spirit as 12 different divine energies, you might say, or divine powers, as he called them. And he called them the 12 powers of man. And so the birth of Christ is about the awakening of all of those powers as they come together in human consciousness. And as we evolve into a greater experience and knowing of that, and an awareness of that and how we participate in being that light in the world. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. And that's really our purpose here. Our purpose here, whether we realize it or not or know it or not, is to be the light of the world. And so we've been exploring how we can experience and express more of the divine light within our own experiences and lives, within our own being, and then be able to share that. Be able to share that with each and every one that we are connected with and we come in contact with, that we are participating with, and even those that we have never seen before. And there's ways that we can actually connect with those because there really is a oneness in our life and our world. And we are a part of that. And a big part of our work is to really tune into those qualities in us that express those unique divine characteristics that Jesus came to show us and came to represent to us. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 and 2, it says, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted." And so we've been exploring the different qualities that Charles Fillmore wrote about, and also another treatise on those 12 divine qualities and powers called Divine Audacity. And the subtitle is Dare to be the light of the world. Dare to be. Are you ready to dare to be the light of the world? Yes. I think that we're really called here together in unity because there's a part of us that knows that that's what we're here to be and do. And we're here to be that light of the world as Jesus called us to do, and yet sometimes we're not real clear on how we do that. And so this is a wonderful practice and awareness of how we can really tune into those different spiritual qualities in us and really step into that energy and that consciousness of being the light of the world and being light in our world. Christmas has actually been put into, it was put on December 25th, and I think primarily it was a time of the winter solstice. And the winter solstice is that time when we are right at that point where the sun is kind of equidistant. If I'm trying to recall it, it's when the sun is actually returning back and coming closer to the earth, or vice versa. The earth is coming closer to the sun. There's a closer connection, you might say, and we're seeing much more light. So we go into this dark time, and right at the time of Christmas, we're actually at that point where we're moving out of the darkness. We're actually moving, the sun and the earth are moving closer together. And so we're actually experiencing more light once we reach that point. And so it's an awareness that no matter where we are and what's going on, we are maybe moving through and into dark times. It's an awareness and an awakening to the understanding that the light returns. In olden times, I think there was actually some concern that the light was going to return. Have you ever gotten up in the morning, or actually have you ever gone to bed at night and really wondered whether the sun was going to shine the next day? No, we kind of get used to that idea that it does come up, doesn't it? And it may be beautiful and rainy like it is, today, and it may be drizzly and cloudy, but there's a part of us that knows that there's a sun there, and that there is something that does come back, and it's an order of things that we can count on and that we recognize. And that's one of the things that really is one of our most valuable spiritual gifts, is that knowing that there are things that we can count on. And this is what I think the gift and the quality of divine order really is. In this series of lessons, we've talked about our faith, and oftentimes we have faith that the sun is going to come back again. It's going to come up again. And the faith is basically built upon our experiences and our awareness that it has pretty much every time that we've been here. Anybody gotten up on a morning and the sun actually did not come up? No. So we have faith that that's going to happen because we've seen and experienced it over and over again. And yet there's also an understanding that how many of you have ever experienced the sun coming up at exactly the same time every day? It doesn't, does it? It doesn't come up at exactly the same time every day. It's always just a little bit different. And there's always a little variation. And so even though there's an order, there's also a disorder, even in that. And even that isn't in order. And it's in order exactly as the way it needs to be. Well, Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity and Mysteries of Genesis, said, "Order is the first law of the universe. Indeed, there could be no universe unless its various parts are kept in perfect harmony." There could be no universe unless its parts are kept in perfect harmony. And I've really been meditating and reflecting on this idea of order and harmony, and I came across the story of a German soldier who was wounded. And many of you are aware that there's an idea that Germans tend to be very organized, and they tend to have a really very, not all of them, of course, but their culture and their society tends to be very much succinct and very much committed to order, and there's a real value and a beauty in that. But he was ordered to go to the military hospital for treatment. And when he arrived at the large, very imposing hospital building, he saw two doors, and one was marked for the slightly wounded and the other for the seriously wounded. And he entered it through the first door, the slightly wounded, and found himself going down a long hall. And at the end of it, there were 2 more doors, and it was marked for officers and for non-officers. Well, he wasn't an officer. He was not an officer, so he entered in through the latter door and found himself going down through another long hall. And then at the end of that, it said, that long hall, there were 2 more doors, and one that said for party members and the other for non-party members. Well, he wasn't a party member, so he took the second door, and when he opened it, he found himself back out on the street. And so he went home, and when he got home, his mother talked to him and said, well, how did it go at the hospital today? And he says, well, Mother, to tell you the truth, the people there didn't do anything for me, but you'd be amazed at how organized they are. Organization is a part of order. And I have to say that that's one of the candles that I tend to light fairly often, because that's one of the places that I know that for myself, I really could use a lot of development in the area of order in a lot of different ways. But at the same time, I'm also aware of an order that is within me and an order that is within life and the universe that is even beyond organization. Now, organization is a part of order, and there would be no universe without some form of organization. If you look out at the night sky, you can see that if it's unobstructed and there's no clouds, you can see oftentimes the amazing vastness of them and the amount of stars. And if you just simply look in general at them, you'll feel like that there's just a chaos almost. There's no, but then if you really look, you can see there's like the Big Dipper, and you'll see the Little Dipper, and you can see different constellations, and yet those are not necessarily out there in the universe. They are actually just simply shapes and form that your mind takes in, and it really is putting that image on those. If I say Big Dipper, I bet there's not a person here that doesn't have an image of a Big Dipper. And yet those are simply bodies out in the universe, and they don't form those shapes from every perspective. If we were to look at those from a different perspective, they would have a totally different shape and form. And so the order of the universe is really everywhere, but it also is in each one of us. And we are actually a part of helping to bring order and into our life and into our experiences. And we do that primarily by how we are seeing life, by how we are looking at things. Our minds actually help to bring us into an awareness of order, oftentimes in the middle of those things that don't seem like it. The sun does rise and the sun does set, but it doesn't always rise and set at the same time. And so there's an awareness that order is a part of our universe, but it's so valuable for us to recognize that it is one of our unique divine qualities, that we are a part of creating the order in the universe. Are you aware of that? You are currently creating whatever is going on in your life experiences through your perceptions. And it is an orderly experience, or sometimes it's not an orderly experience. And we see it as orderly at times, and sometimes we don't see it as organized. Now, many of you are familiar, when I was being interviewed for the position here at Unity, I believe it was Steve, president of the board at the time, or I believe he was, and he asked me what was one of my biggest challenges. And I was very forthcoming, and I said paper. Paper is one of my biggest challenges, folks. I just get so overwhelmed with the paper that comes into my life. The amount of mail and the amount of papers that come into this office and come into my office at home, I just go into overwhelm very quickly, unfortunately. And it's not one of the things that I'm very good at, being organized in terms of getting papers. And so they're stacked, and and I'm not very good at that. But now they're stacked in a particular order, though, I want you to know. There is an order there, believe it or not. Not everyone recognizes that, I realize. But ultimately, from my awareness and the way I work with things, I do have something of an order, and I'm often getting things back into that order that I think that works for me, or at least works to a degree. I love things being totally organized, and it's not one of the areas that I have really truly been able to develop very well. And so I'm open to those who really have those gifts, and I really appreciate and value those gifts of organization. I have someone in my life that's very good at that, and I really appreciate her for that. And she does help me, and she reminds me that things kind of do go better when things are organized and better. And so I'm appreciative of that. And yet I'm also aware that sometimes organization, interestingly enough, you can take organization to the point where it's no longer in order. And I think our opening story kind of talks about that. You know, you can have things so organized that you find yourself right back out on the street, and so it doesn't necessarily always make things right. The other thing about organization is that organization really is a gift, and it's something that all have the ability to do. And there's different variations of gray and all of these different things. And so part of our work is to develop not just an outer organization, but truly to learn to tune into how we can organize our thoughts and our thinking in such a way that the universe is working through us to be able to create greater order in our experiences in life. But order is the framework and structure, pattern, and sequence at the heart of all lives. The organization principle of order is evident in all of nature. In Mark chapter 4:28, it says, "The earth produces of itself first the stalk, and then the head, and then the full grain in the head." And so order underlies so much of our lives and so much of our universe. It's in music, it's in mathematics. If you find, in fact, one of the things that Linda Martella-Whitsett talks about in her book is that if you actually do a search for the beauty of beauty, you'll find a component of that. There's an order of some form. And it may not necessarily be the order that we think, but it oftentimes does really help us to see what beauty is there when we can recognize an order in something and a structure in it. She says, "Do a search for the beauty of math, and you will find stunning images of mathematical order." These amazing images of how things can be ordered. And so when we organize ourselves, what we find is that things around us become even more organized. And one of the key ways of organizing ourselves is really going back to the number one. And the number one is not, believe it or not, our individual self. The number one is all of ourselves. The number one is inclusive of everything and everyone. When you think about that, there's really truly a sense of order when you really think about and see the number one for that matter. And that one is not an individual as much as it is a collective. When we find ourselves in difficult circumstances and situations, sometimes we think that things are not in order. We sometimes look at life out here and see what appears to be chaos. And chaos, there's a chaos theory in physics. Some of you are familiar with this theory, but it's an understanding that when we look out in our universe, it appears to be chaotic, but there are patterns even within those chaotic things that we see and experience out here. And how many of you are familiar with fractals? You familiar with fractals? Man, fractals are based upon numbers that are basically random numbers. But those random numbers, you can actually put these random numbers into different systems and programs, and it will create an amazing order of beauty in these fractals. And if you go deep into each one, there's a replication of that order throughout the whole fractal. It's just amazing. It's a holographic experience, and we actually live in a holographic universe, and so that every part of our universe is connected with every part, but in addition to that, in many ways, every part of our universe is a holistic piece of every other part of the universe, and it reflects the same wholeness as the whole universe. This is one of the beauties of recognizing our amazing holistic world that we live in. And the holism of it is really, have you ever taken a hologram? how many are familiar with what I'm talking about, a hologram? It's these images, and you take an image and you can, from any different perception, it's pretty much the same. And you can take a hologram and you can smash it with a mirror. And if you take that hologram, I remember I had a hologram and I was trying to remember the image that was in there. It was a hologram of an angel, and you take that angel and you hold it in any direction. It would move like it was a 3D dimensional image. Can you get that awareness? But you can take an image like that, that's a hologram, and you can break it. And if you break it into little pieces, you can take a tiniest little piece of that, and you will still see the whole image of that angel in that hologram. Did you know that? No. This is the truth. Try it. If you've got if you're willing to break a hologram, because I like to keep mine, but you can take a hologram. If you break it into pieces, you will see that same whole image in that one small piece. This is how our universe is. That's how you and I are. No matter how broken sometimes things to be, there is an order in all of it, and the wholeness is always there. And so a part of divine order is not that everything is always organized and always in a particular place and always in a particular way, and it is also the idea that there's a place for everything and everything in its place, but it's also an understanding that it's in some ways everything is never in its place. Do you understand what I mean by that? Well, let me talk a little bit about the second part of order that Linda talks about here. And the second part of divine order is adjustment. You see, one of the things that we recognize in our universe is that the universe is always changing. You know that there is no order without change? I know that seems kind of strange, but ultimately, you don't need order if there's never any change. It's all the same, but it's also stagnant. It's basically dead. It's inert. And it's not until there's some energy or movement or action that order is needed or necessary. And order is actually that movement. And it's a movement between stagnation or inertia and activity. And ultimately, that's what order is. It's not one or the other. Order is basically a harmony between inertia and movement. And there's an order between inertia and movement all the time. And we talk about divine order a lot in Unity, and there is an order that is actually beyond our comprehension sometimes, beyond our awareness of it, but it's not necessarily always organized, or at least not organized in the way that we comprehend it or see it. See, it's a movement between organization and chaos. It's a movement between stability and structure on the one hand, and ebbing and flowing on the other hand. It's a movement between following a pattern and a process and being spontaneous and free-flowing. That's what order truly is. We have a tendency to think it's more just simply the one, the pattern and the process. But true order is the coming together of both of those. And I want to say that it's not even, we tend to talk about it in divine order in terms of balance. And one of the things that Linda points out is that the state of balance does not exist. Do you realize that? I had one of my teachers say that basically balance is bogus. The state of balance ultimately does not exist. Now, you can get a scale and you can put weights on things, and so on some level, yes, there is a balance in life. But when it comes to divine order, that's not necessarily order, because divine order really is not so much a balance in life, because everything is always moving. And so there's ultimately never a particular state that we're in that we consider to be balanced. And if we're trying to strive for balance, we're kind of missing the possibilities of real order. Because really, order is not balance as much as it is a movement between those two polarities. And the movement between the polarities ultimately is a harmony. And what we're looking for and striving for in divine order is ultimately harmony. And it's a harmony that is a movement between the polarities. We are living in a polarity. Do you realize that? We are experiencing polarity right now. We're experiencing polarity between stillness and activity. You know, sometimes if I go too far and I get really busy and really I'm just kind of all kinds of things that I'm doing. I'm being very active and I'm constantly moving and I'm doing things. You know, there's a part of me that really enjoys that at times, and it really works. It's great. And then I find that I go to a point where that's no longer so great. You follow me? And I really do have to kind of move back the other way and have that time where I'm simply sitting still and being quiet and turning inward maybe and not being so outwardly focused. You see, we live in the world, but we're really not of the world. But we are in the world, and we're not of the world. And we are in the world, and we're not of the world. That's the truth of where we are. That's the truth of our nature. That's the truth of our being. We are continually being pulled to be in the world, and we're actually being pushed in many ways to be in the world and to express in the world. But if we're constantly only out here, connected to whatever is out here, if we're identifying ourselves with whatever's going on out here, we think that this is who we are truly not in a place of divine order. Ultimately, we are in a place of divine order because divine order exists regardless of whether we're aware of it or not. Wouldn't you agree? And so part of our work is not to try and, we sometimes say that we're going to establish divine order. No, we've never, you don't establish divine order. Divine order has already been established. It already is. It already exists. What we do is we adjust ourselves to that divine order. And so one of the things that we have difficulty with sometimes is that we have difficulty with circumstances and situations in our lives that seem chaotic, that seem challenging, that seem hard, that seem harsh, that seem negative to us. And part of what we are striving to do, whether we recognize it or not, is to reestablish some sense of order in those situations and circumstances. And we have a pretty good idea what order looks like to us, don't you? You know what order looks like, right? You know how things are supposed to be, don't you? We all have this idea of how things are supposed to be. And so part of our struggle, our challenge is that things don't always look the way we think they're supposed to be. Right? Well, what if, let's just kind of throw this out here as a possibility, what if the way things is the way things are supposed to be? No, that can't be the case. That is just no. I can tell you, if things weren't supposed to be this way, they wouldn't be this way. And part of our work is not to necessarily try and make things to be different than they are, but to use those things that are there to help us to be different than we are. And I say different, I don't really mean to change the essence of who we are, but to change how we are showing up and experiencing what is. Eric Butterworth said something that I still am trying to learn. Thank you, Eric. It's one of my life lessons, one of all of our life lessons, I think. He said that our purpose is not to set the world right, but to see it rightly. It's not to set the world right, but to see it rightly. And so one of the first orders of business in our spiritual work, our spiritual development, is not to try and get the world to be the way we think it's supposed to be, but to allow whatever is to transform us in such a way that we can be participants in helping the world unfold in a new way. So trying to change what is actually kind of like trying to how should I put it? Trying to change what is, trying to make it be something other than what it is really kind of like trying to stop a train that's going at 1,000 miles an hour. The truth of the matter is that train is already, the energy that's created that train going at that speed has already been created. You follow me? And so you're not going to stop that. You're not going to change what is. What is already is. Are you with me on that? But what we can do is change our awareness and our energy in such a way that what comes next is perhaps different than what is. Does that make sense? And so part of our recognition of divine order is an understanding that we can be a part of making adjustments in our lives in such a way that we can be a part of helping the polarities of life to come into what Barry Johnson, who wrote this wonderful work called Polarity Management, and it's been a great resource in so many ways in Unity and other just throughout the world. But polarity management is finding that sweet spot between those things that seem to be polar opposites. The things that seem to be polar opposites ultimately have a place where they come together in a harmony. And if we come together in that harmony between those things that seem so opposed to each other, what we find is it's a place of power. It's a place of creativity. It's a place of possibility. It's a place of excitement and new energy and new insight. And so there's a balance that we come to between the place of action and stillness. Julie and I took a yoga class yesterday, a wonderful yoga class. And one of the instructor, Kim, was just very astute and very aware, I thought. And she talked about how what we were doing there on our mat was really what we are doing in our lives and what we're trying to do in our lives. And so she would have us go into certain poses, you know. We did the warrior pose. You guys familiar with yoga? We do the warrior pose. And she would bring your attention to the places where you were tight and tense. And she said, you know, sometimes people think about yoga as a way of relaxing. She said, but I'm going to suggest to you that that's not the case. The purpose, the way that yoga works is it puts you in places of stress. And it helps you to then breathe into those places of stress so that you can let go even in the middle of those times and those places of stress. You guys didn't know I could hold a pole like this, did you? You know, that's what yoga really is, but that's also what unity is. Unity is here not to necessarily get rid of all of the problems and stresses in our lives. That's not what really unity is about. Unity is really to help us to move back into that place of recognition of the well-being of our heart, our mind, our spirit, even in those times when the hustle and bustle of, yes, the Christmas holidays and all of the things that go on and the things that are going on in our world, things are going on in our politics, and things are going on over there in the places that we haven't been to that are filled with hurt and pain and strife. It's to help us to really breathe back into that place where we know that there's something greater and something more at work in our lives. And so it's also an evolution. Divine order is evolution. You see, there's no order unless there's also some form of growth that's happening out of that. We are here to evolve and to grow. And we do that oftentimes because we have found that we are discontented. Discontent is a really part of divine order. But without that experience of feeling discontented, we stay in inertia. We stay where we are. We stay pretty much stuck. And evolution is the power of order demonstrated as development and progress and growth. And in spiritual circles, it's often referred to as transformation. It moves us in the direction of expansion and of greater possibilities. And interestingly enough, it happens in order. We have a tendency to think that sometimes that spiritual growth has an order to it and that we just keep going up and up and up and up and up and up. And the reality is that it's a spiral. There's an order in the universe. And if you look, there's that spiral image is throughout nature, it is throughout our universe, it is everywhere, that we're all a part of a divine spiral. And the spiral moves around and around in different ways until, we go around one way and we come up just a little bit higher, but we're also finding ourselves back with the same problem and, dealing with the same relationship issues or the same money issues or the same. So what we're doing is, we've got a little more awareness. We've come up a little bit higher, but we still have come back to that place where there's another level of our understanding that needs to be uplifted, you might say, or transformed, or a different way of seeing it, perhaps. And we come back to it, and we maybe see it a little differently. And then we keep going around until we come back to it in a way that we can see it, not as limited beings who are helpless and victims, but until we recognize, oh, look at these amazing challenges that I've been creating in my life. Wow, look at the wonderful lessons that I've got to have here. Wow, I wonder if I did this a little differently this time, what would happen? See, there's an order. There's an order in our lives. There's an order to everything. And there's a purpose for it. Now, I am of the opinion, some people say there's a reason for everything. I suggest that I really don't like that phrase. I don't think there is a reason for everything, because that has to do with the intellect. But I know that there is a purpose for everything. And that purpose is to bring us into a greater awareness and alignment with the order that is already present in our lives, in our world, and in our universe. And we are evolving in that way. And we are participating in a way that we can tune into the divine order of whatever is happening in our lives. So we'll talk a little bit about ways that we can develop divine order. In Unity, we have 5 basic principles. Most of you are familiar with those. We've talked about them a number of times, and we've seen it. They've been on the back of our bulletin. I don't think they're on there right now, but they've been on our bulletins. One of the ways that we can find ourselves back in order when we are feeling that sense of chaos or not really getting the awareness of what's going on for us, when we're feeling ourselves challenged by life in some form or some way, is to go back to these 5 principles. And there's an order of these wonderful 5 principles. Do you realize that? I'm going to read off the 5 principles. God is the source and creator of all. When we can really look at that and see the difficult and challenging circumstance and situation and recognize that there's a presence in that of the divine, it immediately begins to shift. Principle 1, there is no other enduring power. God is good and present everywhere. Everywhere. I was reading a story about a baseball game recently, back in 1924, and it was a famous game, and they were talking about the game, and the guy, it was the last inning of the game, and I think that there was score was tied up, and they were all cheering for this guy to get a hit, and he gets his hit, and he hits it out into the outfield, and it hits right at the top of the fence and bounces off and right into the glove of the outfielder, and he takes the ball and he throws it in to the pitcher, and the pitcher throws it in home plate, and the guy's running around the bases, and he gets in and he slides into home plate and throws up a dust storm, and people can't really see what's going on, and the umpire, once the dust clears, he says, "You're out." And the crowd was crazy because they saw him touch the home plate before the ball got there. They knew that this guy was safe. They were just crazy wild. And finally, the announcer came over and said, the umpire says that he was out because he forgot to touch first base. He forgot to touch first base. And when we're working with these principles, the first thing for us to do is to be sure we touch first base. And first base is to recognize that there really is only that one presence and power in our lives. The second thing is, notice that we are spiritual beings created in God's image. The Spirit of God lives within each and every person, and therefore all people are inherently good. It's a little challenging for us sometimes, isn't it? It's challenging for us to see the things that go on out here that we have judged and determined are not good, and recognize that even in those there's an order and that there's something greater at work, that there is a presence within ourselves and within others that ultimately is good. The third thing to do is that we recognize that we create life experiences through our way of thinking. We create life experiences through our way of thinking. So we create the Big Dipper. Do you realize that? When you look out and see the night sky and the stars, you are actually creating that shape and that form. You create the Big Dipper. You create life how you see it. And that's how we're learning, and when we recognize that, we can say, oh, I can create this differently. I can create this differently. And then the fourth thing is to recognize that there's a power in affirmative prayer. I can create this differently, which we believe increases our awareness of the God. So the affirmative prayer, we can see this differently. We can begin to see and affirm life in our bodies. We can see abundance in our purses. We can see abundance in our relationships and our love in our relationships. We can begin to see the possibilities in all aspects of our lives. And this brings us back into alignment with that order. And then the fifth principle that we talk about is knowledge of these spiritual principles is not enough. We must live them. This is how we really allow ourselves to move back into an understanding of divine order. That even in the midst of challenging, difficult circumstances, if we will just go through this little list, interestingly enough, how simple this can be. It seems complicated, but it actually is quite simple. Not always easy, don't get me wrong. It's not always easy to recognize the divine in those that seem to be acting out, as we call it, to put it mildly. But to begin to see that and recognize it, we began to be a part of establishing that. And that's our lesson on order for this week. Let's move into our meditation time. As we breathe in and out, we move into a place of relaxation and peace. And I invite you to focus your attention on the splendid body temple. Just be aware of the structure, the bone, the muscles, the skin, the nerves, the energy that flows through, and the energy that all of that is, and all organized for physical vitality and strength. And just breathe, flowing in and out, and just allow it to be effortless. Let your heart beat rhythmically, steadily, faithfully. And in this place of the body temple, I recognize, I honor the divine order in all of it. And now concentrate your awareness, your attention within the body to a place behind the navel, a place of harmony and balance, the center for order. And in your mind's eye, shine that beautiful green light of order. Allow it to shine on your digestive organs and throughout the integrated links and well-ordered systems in your body. And just see everything functioning and working in harmony. Resting in a knowing that there is a divine order in all the functions. And just know for yourself, I am in divine order. And I am of that order as well. I am the power of order, by which I connect with all of the innate senses of direction, and I tune to that magnificent source, the one mind, from which all life and all divine ideas flow. And I catch those divine ideas and bring them into manifestation by the power of order. And from the within to the without, I am in the order of creativity. I am adjusting, and I am the adjusting power of order itself, easily sensing where to place my awareness and my attention, and I adjust my perceptions, my mindset. And as I do, I also correct my course of action. And I am also the evolving power of order. I'm awakened to an ever-unfolding consciousness of divine growth and development. And I incorporate the best parts into my present, and I reach naturally toward a much fuller and more aware and enlightened possibility and future. And by the power of divine order, I follow a very clear path. I go through the open doors. I choose an orderly course of thought and action, and I bring about order in my life, moment by moment, choice by choice. And I choose to see and to be in divine order. Just take a nice deep breath now. And just let that sense of well-being fill your heart, knowing that you, your life, your world are realigning with that divine order. Take another nice deep breath, and when you're ready, gently open your eyes. Be present here and now. And so it is. Thank you, God.